Hello, Marco. Thank you for being here. We're happy to have you here in Barcelona, and thank you for this little chat with us after your workshop.
My pleasure.
Barcelona is a city with a great cultural and visual richness and a strong photographic tradition. Had you been here before?
Yes, I was here in 2003 on my way down to Granada, where I actually decided to leave Switzerland and go completely into portrait photography. And that was the last stop I did actually before Granada, so I remember it very well.
Did you have time to meet like any local photographer?
No, at the time, not. No, I just kind of slept here and had coffee here and ate here. I came to Spain actually to find out what I want to do with my future.
Okay.
And again in Granada then, and on the parking lot of the Alhambra, I decided to leave Switzerland, leave my studio, and go to South Africa, where I stayed for 2.5 years, and then I went to the US. But it all kind of started on that parking lot in Granada after coming here in beautiful Barcelona.
So you did Switzerland, South Africa, and then you moved to the US.
States, yes.
Right. Okay. So my next question is: you were born in Switzerland, and later moved to the US to develop your career. How did your evolution unfold from your early works to becoming one of the most recognized portrait photographers in the world?
I think when I started portraiture, I was completely isolated from the rest of the world, okay? We didn't have really nicely printed books, nor did we have exhibitions. Switzerland was kind of a vacuum in that respect. And so when I started to do my portraiture, I was kind of on my own. I did it the way I thought it was right, you know. I started in jazz clubs. We had a very nice jazz club very close to where I lived, who has really good jazz musicians and famous ones. And they gracefully gave me some time to photograph them. And that then progressed in a way that in South Africa I could started to do editorial work, and then also more portraiture in that time. And when I went to the US, that was the base of what I had to show for. And maybe because I did it in such an isolated way over the years, in that little town in the middle of Switzerland, that the people in New York said, "Oh, what is that? That's interesting." And that was the base where it started to take on the other thing, which then turned to be what it is now, you know.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So do you think there was a key moment or project that marked a turning point in your career?
Absolutely. I would think I landed in Switzerland to do a jazz festival again, like take portraits from New York. I came from New York and just landed, and I had dinner with a friend, and I went to the bathroom and checked my phone, and I saw that I had about 15 missed calls, and I knew I probably have to go back. I didn't even call yet, but I knew I have to go back. And it was my agent calling me that I can shoot a cover with Hillary Clinton for Time magazine, my first cover for Time. And it was especially the first collaboration with the new photo director, Kira Pollack, who became then very instrumental actually in my life. She really kind of changed my life and everything which then followed it as well, yeah.
Okay. So, talking about Hillary Clinton, you have photographed and continue to photograph big personalities, politicians and artists like President Trump, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and to name a few artists, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Lady Gaga. And so, in that cases, how do you manage to create a trusting environment and capture the essence of that person?
I'm quite I'm not sure whether I captured the essence of that person. I don't even know whether photography is able to do that per se. Some people are more complex than the others. Some people, it's much easier to have a icon of a person, which then kind of leads us to believe this is the real person.
Yeah.
But there's always more layers to any person, even to Trump. Well, maybe not him, but to most people in the world. And the environment we create in being, I think, pretty professional and well prepared. So when people walk in, they know, okay, I deal with people who know what they do. It's even when we don't, they think we know what we do.
Yeah.
And it's very important, I think, for photographers to kind of showcase that to the people they photograph. I know what I do, you're in safe hands.
Mm-hmm. Fake it until you make it.
Fake it until you make it, absolutely. I mean, it's still one of the best mottos for everyone. I can just recommend it.
Okay. And during these photo shoots, have you had like difficulty with someone that you didn't know how to resolve, or how do you manage to resolve that cases?
It's impossible to do what I do for so many years and you don't have difficulties along the way. But it's like a captain you would judge by when he only sails in a nice afternoon on the Lake of Zurich.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, we judge a captain whether he can brave the sea in the Bering Strait. And in a way, I always understood those as tests to my professionality, and especially as a human, because you have to de-escalate the situation.
Okay.
And you have to kind of show the other person, let's go this next step, and we take the next step. And somehow it always worked out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it was not as successful as we hoped it is. It's impossible, quite frankly, but it's at least that the magazine or whoever called you to do that has what they need to do something they're still happy with.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about photo shoots, when do you decide to do a photo shoot in color or black and white, and what emotions or messages do you seek to convey with each choice?
That's a good question. I think ultimately, I don't even know. Sometimes you think, oh, that's going to be a great black and white story. And then all of a sudden you see the colors and you think, oh no, that would be a waste because it goes so well together. I think you have to react on it, and then also in case when you work with a magazine, often you have to discuss how much black and white you can push. Sometimes you can push all the way, but most likely you can't all the way. So I'd like to decide that more after than actually before, because it's also dangerous that you have a perception that's what I want to do, and are not willing to see how it really looks in front of you. And sometimes it would scream, make me in color, and sometimes it would scream, make me in black and white.
Yeah, well, sometimes it starts with color, and then you see how strong that picture is in black and white, and you go that way, right?
Or vice versa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to know, how do you prepare for a photo shoot, and or if you have any rituals or creative processes you follow before starting?
I think we are very methodical. Our sets are run like you would run a takeoff of a space shuttle. We always make fun of ourselves and being very precise and very on point, and everything is where it should be. Because only when everything is kind of in a safe space, you can be really creative. Yeah. Because you feel free to go in whatever direction you know you cannot fall on your face, and that's a really good place to be. And I recommend, especially to young photographers, to look into that, to prepare. Not so much like, oh, I want to do this and this pose, because the pose will be dictated by the person you photograph, probably more than by what you want to do.
Yeah.
it's more about like, yeah, I like this look and overall by what light it is and whatever, but and then also it's the methodicality of having a set really well prepared, and everyone on the set, including the team, knows exactly what to do at what point. And then again, when people walk in, they feel that, they feel safe too, even when they maybe shouldn't. But we are safe to be creative in that space, and I think that's so far for me that worked as a good strategy. But there's many different strategies out there. There's many different photographers who have different ones, and they are at least as successful. There's not one way, but that is my way. Yeah.
So you would say like preparation is key in your case, especially when you're doing a photo shoot with people like a president or the president of the States or Steve Jobs. You had 5 minutes with him. You think it's really important to be all set up and ready to shoot, right?
Yeah, I think especially those two examples you just mentioned are extreme examples. Any president, you know, there's little time involved. And it has to go very quick, and their people are counting you literally down by the minute, you know. 1 minute to go, 30 seconds to go, and so on. And for you, that prep helps you to know that you can reach your goal, you know. With other people, I don't think it's that important. Like Steve Jobs, that was a different story, because Steve Jobs was a no bullshit man, and he would react probably in any way of sort of slightly taking longer than he would think that would take. He would not take that well. Yeah. And insofar the two guys met who can work together in a way, because I'm very methodical and he was too. And so it's definitely good to be that way in that respect, but other shoots are way less under pressure. It's much more a flow, and way less pressure on time, and also from the people on the outside towards you. Okay.
Yeah, I would like you to tell us about Beyond 9/11, Portraits of Resilience. It is a deeply emotional project. I want to know what inspired you to embark on this project, and how was the conceptualization process?
Yeah, Beyond 9/11 was definitely one of the ones I cherished the most. I had dinner with Kira Pollack at Odeon restaurant in New York, and she said, I have a story and I would like you to do it. It's a whole, it's a very big story about the ripple effect of 9/11. And she didn't know yet who is exactly in it, but she said we aim for the whole Bush government, we aim for soldiers, for firefighters, from people in Iraq who got actually hurt by Americans in that war. And I mean, I said, oh man, this is a dream, you know, this is a photographer's dream. And after dinner as dessert, one of the best photo directors of the world gives you that for dessert. That's a pretty good dinner, I tell you that. And then I remember me saying at this dinner, I said, we have to film that. And Kira said, we don't have the resources to film that. And I said, well, I make it work somehow. And then we went and learned how to record sound, and have possibilities how we could get that was pre-LED travel kit, which we could get the quality, but then still kind of could travel without blowing the bank of Time magazine. And so in a weird way, I pushed that to the point I had about two and a half weeks to prepare for the first one. And in the end, we made that film, and I'm very happy we did.
You won an Emmy for it. Congratulations. What did it mean for you to receive this recognition? And do you think it changed your perspective on photography or as your role as a photographer?
I think when you do motion interviews like we do here, you see the limitations of photography. Because the motion interview tells so much more backstory.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, it makes you a better photographer, because then you look at the pictures and you go, oh, really? That's all? Like, it pushes you to bring as much of that backstory into that, which is sometimes, quite frankly, impossible. But I think it's super important to understand. And there's always a backstory. That's what I said initially. There's never the truth in a picture, you know. But you know, for us, this whole project was only a good thing, you know. It was working with some of the most talented people in the world on a subject matter very complex. And through Time magazine, we had unbelievable access to people, like the whole Bush government, like all of them, most of them died since, you know.
Yeah.
And that is an incredible situation. And then in the end, I remember I was in Alaska and we got an email, and my assistant, bless her, Tara Rice, at breakfast, she said, "Did you read the email?" I said, "What email?" And she said, "That you're nominated for an Emmy." I said, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, you're nominated for an Emmy." I said, "No, really?" And then I looked at the email again, and I never thought we're gonna get this. And when it happened, it was maybe like that little cherry on top of something which was in its entirety just a very, very beautiful, and for me, when I look back, one of the highlights of my professional life, together with those amazing people working on that project.
Yeah.
Just one really, really beautiful memory.
Yeah, it's beautiful to get this recognition for such a personal and beautiful project.
It meant a lot to us because with doing that film part, it opened up a new space, and Time magazine really, they said, we made a designated website. There was a documentary on HBO. There was a documentary on the website. There was a photo, the whole Time magazine from end to front was filled with the pictures we made, except the cover the great James Nachway did. And after being nominated, which was kind of, for us, it was unbelievable. And then I never expected us to win that thing. And when we went there, people actually said, like, when you sit in the very back, it's not going to happen. And we sat in the very back, and also this is for me a very, very beautiful memory. When they said our name, everything was only in slow motion for a second. But that's that, you know. I think the memory I have is actually much more of the work and the stress we had, and the work and the collaboration with the people. That is my personal gratification enough, I must say. Yeah.
A long walk until the stage, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of work. But you know, who cares? You know.
Yeah.
That's all forgotten. In the end, it's a part of who you are and what you did and what you learned. And we learned a lot in these interviews. We learned a lot about what happened and what didn't happen, and the complexity of it. And I'm forever grateful for it. Yeah.
I want to know a little bit more. I want to know, how was the experience of combining photography and multimedia storytelling to convey these stories?
I think it's today magazines want to have content which is multimedial. I think it's a good idea for photographers to definitely look into this direction. I did my first film in probably 1990. So I do this for quite a while. I was always interested I love music, I love stories, and I love pictures. And it all comes together in motion pictures.
The whole package.
It's the whole package, right? And for me, the photography part is always a very integral part of it. And of course, it's my bread and butter, but I always knew I want to push this envelope much, much more. And after 9/11, it's also the technical revolution, you know. We had an immense technical revolution. 9/11 was possible because Canon had their Mark II with the big chip. That was the first time you could even think of doing something. And now we have the LEDs, you know, this fantastic LED lights you have, which even 10 years ago was kind of unthinkable. And cameras got much better, much cheaper, in a much better quality also. Sound is much more accessible, editing is much more accessible. It's in that respect a good time to be a visual storyteller whatsoever. It's really hard to kick against the noise, you know. There's a lot of content and a lot of competition all the time now, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting to combine the two.
In addition of beyond 9/11, you have worked on another humanitarian projects, notably your collaboration with the UNMAS, the United Nations Mine Action Service. I want to know, how do you balance your commercial work with more personal or humanitarian projects, and which type of projects do you find the most rewarding?
I try not to make, I mean, the great Eddie Adams once said, a camera is an unlikely weapon. And Napoleon said, the true history is a bunch of lies we all agree upon. But it's much harder when a photo lens is recording what's happening. You know, it's much harder to record a lie. And I hope that's true in 2 years or 3 years still because of AI, you know. I think to do any work which is journalistic, which I pretty much did for the United Nations Mine Action Service, came from a point where I said, okay, this whole mine situation, and I knew people who knew people, and they asked me and I asked them whether we want to collaborate in something, and in no time I was in so deep, you know. And once you see what some people deal with, you cannot walk away from it so quick, you know. It's a real situation which is extremely difficult for millions and millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
And there's not much I can do as a photographer. I can't cure cancer, and I cannot make clean water in parts of the world which need it, and all of that. But the one thing I can do is kind of show what's happening there, I mean, landmines are not on top of people's radar nowadays. But some people some countries had 20 million landmines, you know. And so it was natural for me to, at the time, kind of go and try to help them to make publicity, to get the money to take them out. That was kind of what I tried to achieve, is that they could gain enough money from all the donor states that they have money to put the mines out.
Yeah, so basically portraying the reality of millions of people. People think that there's mines is a thing from the past, but for these people it's every day, and it's not only mines, it's also unexploded ammunition and ordnance, which is after every war lays around, and then in the end it's also here in the West. Imagine that stuff is driven across the border, and somebody attaches a cell phone to it, and it's not their problem, it's our problem. And in that respect, we all have to work on it and to see that stuff gets solved, because it's a real nightmare. It kills industries, it kills investment. It's very difficult. Obviously, people get hurt. Mostly our children get hurt, and it was quite difficult actually for me. There were some times where I woke up after a couple of weeks after coming home with all the pictures in my head, and but who cares? I mean, I choose to do that, and I think it's not, for me it was just important that
I could do something with what I am. And I know I'm not a doctor, but here we go. That's what I want to do, and that's what I want to help. And that transition is kind of easy because you do what you do. You do portraits, basically.
Yeah.
Just somewhere in Afghanistan and not in Hollywood.
Hollywood. If you had the opportunity to work on a similar project about another historical or social event, which one would it be?
That's a good question. We did actually two projects in quick succession. One was about the march to Washington, where Dr. King had his speech, Have a Dream.
Yeah.
And I met some of the most impressive people I ever met in my life. Some people most of them passed on since then, but some of real heroes of mine who fought for justice and were never afraid to do so. They went to prison 24, 23, 40 times sometimes. Yeah. They had a toothbrush on them because they knew they're gonna go to prison today because they were protesting. Things like that leave an impact in me, and they left an impact. It's like, what kind of person you want to be? I mean, do you want to be a person who's just kicked around, or one who's inspired by these people to push back? Mm-hmm. And I'd much rather be on that side, and I hope if destiny will push us to a place where this will be needed, that I have the strength and the power to do so.
Okay. Talking about humanitarian projects, do you believe photography can be a tool for raising awareness and generating social change? And how have you seen this reflected on your work?
I know it's not that I think it could be, I know it is. The Vietnam War was shortened by people like Addie Adams and Nick Wood and all these people who showed what's happening in Vietnam. I mean, we know that that has a direct impact on people and insofar politics. I think I know from other stories that James Nachway made a story about a famine, and then once he has published it at the New York Times Magazine, that it had an impact on the government and to solve other things. Okay. It does have power. Don't misunderstand how much power it can have. For myself, I don't know. I see, the thing is, you do what you do and you give your best you can, but you never know how much impact it ultimately will have, you know. Mm. If it has a little impact, good. You know, in the beginning you have the arrogance that you want to change the world, you know, you want to make it better. And that's, of course, you should have that, because that's where the passion is fed from. But in the end, after years, you understand, if all my efforts help to make one child's life better, all worth it. You know what I mean? It's the small steps. It's not, I learned that you have to be more humble and accept the small steps over big steps, for sure, you know.
Yeah, at the end, what is more important is to put the focus on a social cause that you care about, right? Yeah, and I encourage people always to utilize their cameras as this unlikely weapon Eddie Adams so pointedly said it could be. Because there's a lot of injustices in this world, in Europe as well, and in many other places. I mean, in many other places, but also in Europe, definitely in the US, and so with documenting it, it might not change the moment because everything is in turmoil, but at least we see years later that it happened. It's always, every time you press the trigger of a camera, or a film camera as a fact, a timeline starts to run. Mm-hmm. And even the most boring photo is in 20 years a document. It will remind you of something which is maybe not there anymore. And so in that respect, I think even when it is not immediately making change, it will at least document it for times to come. Yeah. let's talk a little bit about your workshop at the Photo Forum Fest. What does it mean for you to participate as the main speaker and share your extensive experience at this event?
I don't know, it puts me in a weird place always, you know. I mean, it's like I would choose very different men or women than me. But I mean, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I know everyone here working at it is very passionate. And so it's an obligation. I was lucky enough to do what I do, and I feel it's an obligation in a weird way to give back to the community and to my media, you know, photography in first place. And so in that respect, whenever I have time, which is not always the case, but whenever I have time, and thankfully it worked out, I will do whatever I can to promote photography and help younger or not so young people also. I don't care. Maybe you can inspire something in people. They told me, I heard of a lady today said, you know, at school it was very hard on her, you know, and I said, well, I know many now really famous photographers who heard the same. Mm-hmm. I heard the same. I was not even allowed to be a student in Switzerland. So it's sometimes good to hear that from people in person, and I think even if that is again that one child and not changing the world, I think it's good to if you can just maybe encourage someone to look at it that way, you know, it's good.
What advice would you give to emerging photographers who are looking to develop their own style and make a name of themselves in the industry?
Okay, I mean, advice, I'm not really the person who should give advice, but I think the one thing I want to say is stop looking at so many pictures on Instagram, isolate yourself from all the noise, come up with something unique, own it, and then fight for it, you know, and hope somebody likes it. Obviously, nobody will take you up when nobody likes you, but create your own language and I always like to say that the example, imagine the Beatles would have listened to 10 albums in the morning when they, in the afternoon, went to Abbey Road Studios to record. They're now like part of world cultural history albums. No, they wouldn't. We wouldn't have those albums. And so a lot of photographers in the morning before they go to work, you know, they look at hundreds and hundreds of pictures of other photographers, and the only thing you do then is kind of copy. It's always a layer in your head. And just stop doing that. Take your inspirations from in museums, from painters, you know. When I see a Caravaggio, it still blows my head away, you know. I said that today, he paints light we didn't even have at the time. You know, we didn't have umbrella light or whatever, you know, and candles, the daylight or the sun, or clouded sky or a mix, but he didn't have any umbrella light. Nevertheless, he still painted that from his feeling and God. I much rather take inspiration from paintings, from food, from music, from films, for short films, than looking at 100 photographers. That work is done, and that work is seen.
And you won't find your own style there. And
you won't find your own style, I guarantee you. Look to do your own thing, and then you have to fight for it. You cannot just ban. And like, all the people in cultural history had to suffer to get their way across. Van Gogh would be now 100 times over millionaire, but he was not. You know, it takes time to grip, and you have to be ready to go that extra length to make your mark, and hope that somebody likes your work. You know, but if when people call your number, they know who. They want to know who answers that phone. And if you're one of many, They have that one, I promise you. They have, a good magazine has the person who does something like you've seen on Instagram in short dial. They already would have called this guy.
Yeah.
So why should you do the same? I think that's very important. That whole overload of inspiration, I don't believe in it personally.
Okay, a little bit of a tricky question. If you could photograph anyone, living or a historical figure, who would it be and why?
I mean, historical figures, there's a long list.
Okay.
There's a long list of really nasty people. Today, living ones, that's hard. I don't know. I don't think I mean, I photographed many people. I was blessed enough to have the chance to be in the presence and spend time with people I really admired. A lot of them had no famous name, just to be clear.
Yeah.
They were amazing. The one person, which is one of my absolute heroes, is a man called Akri Ra in Cambodia. He single-handedly demined 50,000 mines with a knife.
Wow.
Himself. So those are the people you look at and go like, wow. You know, it's not a movie star, even though I love some people as actors, of course.
Yeah.
But that's that thing where I go, wow, okay, that's kind of very, very impressed. And the list of people I would like to photograph still, I mean, there are people, it's like musicians who are still alive who I admire, and maybe a couple actors and a couple writers, but most of the people I hear music from or read, unfortunately they're all dead.
Okay. One last question. What photographic project or dream do you still hope to fulfill?
I would like to do another go at the United Nations Mine Action Service. There was talk that we go one time to Yemen, but that's right now not a good idea. The Americans just bombed Yemen 15th of March. And I don't know, it's really hard to say, you know. For me, I'm right now, that also has to do because right now I'm busy with doing my own film. It's a feature film. I wrote it myself, I directed myself, and I'm busy kind of putting that all together, and then the storyboards and all of that, and the pre-production it takes to get it off the ground. And for the last 2 years, that when I'm not working on my projects as a photographer, that kept me like 12 hours a day busy. So I have to be honest, I have not even time right now to do anything at the site, because that thing is really keeping me busy, and I love that because I learned so much in the last 2, maybe 3 years, more than I did in the 30 years before. Okay,
so that's it. That's the interview. Thank you for your time, Marco. And I hope you have a nice day here in Barcelona.
I'm sure I will.
Enjoy the Photo Forum Fest.
I sure I will. I mean, I'm sure I will enjoy Barcelona too. And you know, I mean, in the end, it's done by people with passion. And I think as long as they're passion, you find always like these people, they gravitate to each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You find a musician, he's passionate. Somehow you gravitate to each other because you have a passion to, not even important that he does a different thing than I do, you know, or she. Cool, okay.
Okay.